At 34, Sarah finally understood why she had never felt at home. Because I looked at family photos and saw strangers. Because every word of love from parents sounded like a lie, even when it was true. She spent 3.5 decades building a life on foundations that were never solid. And when he discovered the truth, it wasn't through a DNA test or hidden documents. It was through one word, a single word said by chance, that opened a 34-year chasm. And on the other side of that chasm, there was a child she had never met, a child that she was. Pause. How much of you survive when you discover that your entire life has been built on an edited version of the truth? Sarah Lynn Bennett grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, in a red brick house at the end of a quiet street. Middle child, between two brothers. David, 3 years older. Jessica, 5 years younger. His parents, Robert and Linda Bennett, were teachers. He taught history in high school. She, English in elementary school. A normal family. Predictable. Stable. But Sarah never felt part of it. She couldn't explain it. It was something subtle, imperceptible to anyone from the outside. But for her, it was constant, as if there were an invisible film between her and the rest of the family, a distance she couldn't cross. David and Jessica were close. They had inside jokes. They played together. They looked like their parents. Sarah was different. Physically, she didn't look like anyone. Wavy black hair when everyone had light, straight hair. Dark eyes when everyone had blue or green eyes. You pull great-grandmother, Linda would say. But there was more than appearance. Sarah felt like a piece that didn't fit, as if she had been placed in the wrong box of a puzzle. She liked different things. I read books that no one else in the family read. I listened to music that no one understood. He dreamed of places that no one wanted to visit. Sarah has always been a stranger in the family. David joked. And it was true, but it hurt, because Sarah didn't want to be weird. She wanted to belong. At the age of 8, Sarah asked her mother, "Why don't I look like you?" Linda tensed. "You look alike, yes, your way. But David and Jessica..." "Every child is different," Linda interrupted, her voice steady. "Don't ask those questions, Sarah." Sarah never asked again, but the question remained alive within her. As a teenager, Sarah began to have identity crises. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person she saw. She felt disconnected from her own body, from history itself. "It's just puberty," Linda would say. But it wasn't. It was something deeper. Something Sarah had no words to explain. Sarah graduated from high school in 2005 and went to the University of Arizona to study anthropology. She was fascinated by identity, by cultures, by people who needed to find out who they were, as if, by studying others, she could understand herself. It was at university that he met Marcus. He was a sociology student, black, from a Jamaican family, with rich stories about origin, ancestry, belonging. Sarah envied that, because she had no stories. When Marcus talked about his grandparents, his great-grandparents, the traditions that spanned generations, Sarah felt an emptiness. "Tell me about your family," he would ask. "There's not much to tell," she replied. And there wasn't, because Sarah never felt that this family was really hers. They married in 2011. Small ceremony in Sedona. Linda and Robert were there, but they seemed far away. As always, David and Jessica too. But Sarah felt that they were visitors at the party itself. Marcus Natheva. "Your family is cold," he once said. "It's just the way they are," Sarah replied. But it was not only that. It was how they were with her. With David and Jessica, Linda was affectionate. Rhea embraced. With Sarah, there was restraint. Care. As if Linda was always walking on eggshells. Sarah tried to ignore it, but it hurt. In 2014, Sarah became pregnant. It was the first time in her life that she felt like she was creating something that was completely her own. A child, hers and Marcus's, with her blood, with her story. But when Lily was born, Sarah looked at that little face and felt panicked. What if she grows up not knowing who she is? Sarah whispered to Marcus, "What do you mean? What if she feels lost? Disconnected?" Marcus Franzi Atesta. Sarah, she's going to have you. And me. She'll know who she is. But Sarah wasn't sure, because she didn't know it herself. At the age of 32, Sarah began therapy, not because it was in crisis, but because I wanted to understand. Understand why you've always felt adrift. Because he was never able to connect with his own family. Tell us about your childhood, the therapist asked. Sarah said, and when he told it, he realized something. She had no clear memories of before the age of 4. Nothing. It was as if his life had started from nothing. It's common, the therapist said. Few people remember the early years. But Sarah felt there was more. She started asking questions. He asked for baby photos. Linda hesitated before showing it. The photos were few. I could barely see the child's face. Why so few photos? Sarah asked. We didn't have a good camera at the time, Linda replied. But David, who was only 3 years older, had dozens of baby photos. Sarah asked for the birth certificate. It took Linda weeks to find it. When she finally turned it in, Sarah looked at the document. Something seemed strange. The paper was different from David and Jessica's certificates. The typography, the format, everything seemed slightly off. Sarah searched online. He discovered that certificates issued in Arizona in the 1980s had a specific format. Hers didn't match. Mom, my certificate is different, Sarah said. Linda turned pale. It must have been reissued. They changed the format over time. But why did it need to be reissued? I don't remember. Sarah, it was a long time ago. Sarah felt that she was being deceived, but I didn't know what. In November 2023, Sarah went to visit Linda. Robert had passed away 2 years earlier. Linda lived alone now. They were in the kitchen, having tea, when Linda said, "You've always been so different from others." Sarah looked at her. "What do you mean?" Linda hesitated. "Different like?" "Just different." Sarah felt something move inside her, an urgency. "Mom, I need you to be honest with me." Linda looked away. "About what?" "About me. About who I am." Linda was silent for a long time, and then, in a voice so low that Sarah almost didn't hear it, she said, "You weren't born Bennett." The world stopped. Sarah felt the floor disappear. "What?" Linda closed her eyes. "You've been adopted." The words fell like breaking glass. Sarah couldn't breathe. "Adopted?" "Yes." "When?" "You were 4 years old." Sarah felt the tears come. "For years? I was 4 years old and you never told me." Linda began to cry. "We wanted to protect you." "Protect?" Sarah shouted. "You stole my story from me." "It wasn't like that." "How was it then?" Sarah interrupted, her voice breaking. "Who am I? Where did I come from? Who were my parents?" Linda sobbed. "I don't know everything. The adoption was complicated." "Complicated like?" Linda got up, trembling, and went to the bedroom. He came back with a box. Inside, documents, rolls of an adoption agency, a social report, and an original birth certificate. Sarah picked up the paper with trembling hands. Name, Sarah Marie Rodriguez. Date of birth, March 12, 1989. Mother, Elena Rodriguez. Father, unknown. Sarah looked at the name. Sarah Marie Rodriguez, not Sarah Lynn Bennett. Rodriguez. She had never been Bennett. She read the social report. Elena Rodriguez was 19 years old when Sarah was born. Single. No family support. She struggled to raise her daughter alone for 4 years. But he couldn't. In 1993, Elena turned Sarah over to the foster care system. Sarah spent 6 months in a foster home before being adopted by Robert and Linda Bennett. And they changed his name. They erased his past. And they never told the truth. Sarah looked at Linda. "You took my mother away from me." "She gave it to you," Linda said defensively. "But you deleted it. You made me believe that I have always been Bennett, that I have always been your daughter." "You're my daughter," Linda cried. "No," Sarah said, her voice icy. "I never was." Sarah left Linda's house in shock. She drove for hours without a destination. For years. She had lived 4 years as Sarah Marie Rodriguez. And I didn't remember anything. How was it possible? She returned home. Marcus was waiting. What happened? Sarah told everything. Marcus turned pale. Were you adopted? Yes. And they never told you? Never. Marcus hugged her as she cried. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember. For years. Did she have memories of that age? She forced her mind to turn back. And then fragments began to appear. A dark-haired woman singing in Spanish. A small apartment. Hot. The smell of cinnamon. A soft voice. Mija, ven aquí. Sarah began to cry. Because she remembered. Not much. But I remembered. There was a woman who loved her. And that disappeared. Sarah told David and Jessica. They were shocked. Were you adopted? Jessica repeated in disbelief. Yes. And we never knew? You were children. They probably didn't understand. David kept quiet. I always thought you were different, he said finally. But I never imagined. Sarah looked at them. Your brothers. Or not, because now she knew. They were not her blood. They never were. And that distance she had always felt made sense now, because she really didn't belong. Sarah needed to find Elena. She hired a private investigator. He delivered all the documents, the original certificate, the social report. 2 weeks later, he called. I found your biological mother. Sarah felt her heart race. Is she alive? Yes. He lives in Tucson. Sarah wrote down the address with trembling hands. She waited a week before she got the courage. And then one morning he got in the car and drove to Tucson. The house was small, painted light yellow. Sarah rang the bell. A woman opened the door. Gray hair, dark eyes, tired face. Can I help you? She asked. Sarah tried to speak, but couldn't. He only handed in his birth certificate. Elena looked at the paper. His hands began to tremble. Sarah? Sarah nodded, tears flowing. Elena dropped the roll and hugged Sarah so tightly it hurt. She cried. He cried for minutes that seemed like hours. When they parted, Elena held Sarah's face with both hands. I thought I'd never see you again. They sat down in the room. Elena made coffee, and he began to count. She was 19 years old when she became pregnant. Sarah's father disappeared. Elena tried to raise Sarah herself, but it was impossible. She had no money. I had no support. He worked 3 jobs and could barely pay the rent. I loved you, Elena said, her voice breaking. More than anything, but I couldn't give you what you needed. Then you handed me over. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I thought you would have a better life, that you would be happy. Sarah looked at her. You left me with strangers. Elena closed her eyes. I know, and I live with that guilt every day. Did you try to find me? I tried, but the adoption was closed. They changed his name. They didn't let me know where you went. Sarah felt her anger grow. They erased you. They erased my past. They made me believe that I was always Bennett. Elena began to cry again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sarah wanted to be angry with her, but he couldn't, because she saw the pain in Elena's eyes, the pain of a mother who lost her daughter, and he never got over it. Sarah returned to Phoenix. She went to Linda's house. You erased my mother, Sarah said. Linda looked away. We thought it was better for you to adapt. Better? Sarah repeated. I spent 30 years feeling lost, disconnected, without knowing why. And it was because you stole my story from me. We gave you a house, Linda said, her voice defensive, a family, education. But they didn't give me the truth. Linda began to cry. I did the best I could. Your best was enough, Sarah said, her voice steady, because you raised a daughter who never knew who she was. She left before Linda could answer. Sarah never returned. She kept in touch with Elena. They spoke to each other every week. Sometimes Sarah visited Tucson. Elena met Lily. She was moved. She has your smile, Elena said. Sarah smiled. For the first time, She felt like she belonged to someone. But he also felt lost, because she had lost 30 years. 30 years without knowing who he was, without knowing his mother, without understanding why she always felt out of place. And that time would never return. Sarah is 36 years old now. She is still named Sarah Bennett, because it's the name you know, the name he carried all his life. But her name is also Sarah Rodriguez, because that's who she's always been. She lives between two worlds, the world that was built for her and the world that was taken from her. Neither is complete. Sarah writes now, a blog about late adoption, about children who were adopted and never knew it. She helps others who discovered, too late, that their lives were built on lies. I spent 34 years living like Bennett, she wrote recently, but I've always been Rodriguez. And taking so long to figure out robbed me of something I'll never get back, the chance to grow up knowing who I really was. Sarah looks at Lily and promises, you will never lie to her. It will never erase your past, because identity is not something that is given, or it is removed. It is something that is discovered, and Sarah spent her whole life searching. She's still looking, because when you learn who you really are at the age of 34, you realize there's a child inside you that never had a voice, a child who was silenced, erased, forgotten, and now you need to learn to listen to her, even if it's too late to change what's been lost. Sarah visits Elena every month. They cook together. They talk in Spanish. Sarah is relearning the language she spoke when she was 4 years old. It's strange, as if she was going back to something she never really left. Linda called once. Sarah did not answer, not because he doesn't love Linda, but because he doesn't know how to love her anymore, how to love someone who raised you, but also stole from you. Sarah has no answers. There are only questions, and the hope that Lily never has to do them. Sarah was 34 years old when she finally learned who she really was. 34 years living a life built on silence. And when the truth came, it brought no relief. It brought mourning. I mourn for a child who was erased, for a mother who was forgotten, for decades of disconnection that finally made sense. What about you? If you discover at the age of 34 that you are not who you thought you were, would you be able to rebuild from scratch? Or would he spend the rest of his life regretting lost time? Leave it in the comments. And sign up to follow other stories of people who learned too late who they really were.